Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter and that is Connor. We are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2 Episode 10. It's called Sanctuary. So spoilers for the episode as always. This one's about a race of aliens who seek refuge from the other side of the wormhole, starting with one ship that comes through, and then we kind of learn a bit about them, and then it kind of, gets bigger from there in terms of what they're here for and where to place them. Things get a bit more complicated when they decide where they want to go and then have to deal with the conversations that leads to. But we'll get into everything. I will say first, I've not brought up comparisons to Babylon 5 since very early season 1. I don't think. Admittedly, it's been a while since we did those episodes, but it's been a while. I've not mentioned it recently. There is one thing here, which is that this alien race, it's not the exact same, but they have one particular quality that's a lot like the Centauri on Babylon 5, which is the tall wall of hair kind of thing they've got going on. It's a little different. It looks not the exact same because the Centauri in Babylon 5 have it kind of like further back in the middle of their head. So it's got a very distinct look, sort of almost like a peacock style,
like a sideways mohawk.
Sideways mohawk. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I've described it like that in the past. Actually, the sideways mohawk.
For the record, I've never watched Babylon 5, so I don't have a visual reference. I'm just kind of basing off your description.
This is more like someone's got a really tall sort of lick going up at the front of some of these haircuts. At least in the women, anyway, of this race. Which is why the main woman I kept thinking of as the Ginger Wall, because she had a ginger wall of hair. That's not her name, though. Her name's Hanik, apparently.
I would have remembered that.
No, you wouldn't have.
So now that you said it, I'm like, yes, that is her.
That sounds right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we didn't spend 30 seconds before the start of the recording reminding ourselves what the name of the entire alien race was called, because we couldn't remember.
Because the thing is, and I don't mean this as a criticism, it kind of doesn't matter. I don't need to remember it. You don't have any problems. This is one of those things where when you're watching it and they refer to it constantly, there's never any doubt. As soon as it's mentioned, you know exactly who it's referring to or what it's referred to. Like, there's never any confusion. It's just recalling it after a made-up word that you've heard for the first time in the last hour. Like, sometimes that could be hard to recall without the prompting.
Yeah, and if I was to guess, I would say we're probably never going to see these people again, so...
I would suspect as much.
Yeah, the Screens, though, just for the record, in case
not
anyone's...
the Skeksis like I was going with.
No, that's Dark Crystal, Connor, you fool.
I know. You would know, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. You are the resident Dark Crystal expert.
Anyway, what did you think of this episode?
Barring a couple of specific elements, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, this one's got a pretty middling rating on IMDb, so I think I saw that last time and went, oh, this one sounds interesting, but the rating's kind of clashing with what it sounds like it could be. And I would say I lean towards the positive as well.
I think it's got a lot of good qualities.
Yeah, I don't think it's perfect. I think the difficult sort of situation it comes up, I think there's maybe some more exploration they could have done with the debate as it goes on. Yep. But ultimately, they only have so much time and it kind of gets cut short a little bit. I suspect some of these ideas are ones that we'll return to. I don't think this is the first time we're ever going to have, or the last time I should say, we're going to have refugees who need a home. And there's some funny little beats in there, even building up that stuff early on. Like something as simple as like there's a whole thing where the computer can't translate their language yet. It needs to listen to them over and over again. So it's like, hey, keep them talking because eventually, the AI and the computer will be able to figure out what they're saying. And that's kind of like the mistranslating, or I say the lack of any translating for the first 10 minutes leads to some humor, some trying to understand without any verbiage, anything like that. And then there's a sort of fun scene where it starts to come in bit by bit, but only certain words are being translated. And when she's saying, hey, yes, the rest of my people are on the other side of, I think she calls it the eye of the universe, but she means the wormhole. It's like, oh, 9 or something. And like, 9?
Yeah.
Was it 3, whatever the number was, the digit's irrelevant, but it's like 300? What's that second word? 3,000? And then Odo's like, 3 million. And she's like, yeah, that's the one, 3 million. And it's like, that's a lot of people. Our station can't hold that many.
The station's like, we can hold like 7,000, not 3 million.
And that's 7,000 total, including all the people who are already there, presumably.
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's some light little bits of comedy kind of sprinkled throughout. Quark gets a couple of moments. One with Odo, surprisingly, because they never have good comedy together.
Yeah. Famously never interact.
No, never interact or have any memorable moments. It's not my favorite part of the whole show so far or anything like that. Yeah. But let's ignore all that for a minute. Let's ignore everything else for a minute.
Oh God, who's in it?
No. This isn't leading to a bit. This isn't
one
of my
like
bits.
It was leading to a hit television show reference.
No. Although one of our husbands, one of the main lady's husbands, I recognize the actor. He's in Alien Resurrection, which I suppose technically was written by the creator of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Since you asked for it.
Hey, we're not playing 7 Steps.
But you asked for one, I gave you. There you go. No. I want to talk about the word Dominion. Okay. Because I know that's important, right? Let's not pretend here. We both know that's an important word going forward in this show, and we shouldn't. We just do because of, well, I know it because of Picard. I think you just sort of picked it up from
general osmosis. Pop culture osmosis. Yeah. Unfortunately, believe it or not, Star Trek's kind of popular. It has been for a long time, and you tend to see things about it.
Yes, I know Dominion's going to be a big thing, and I also know the phrase Dominion War is probably going to be a thing. I don't know a lot about it. I don't know any context really, but
that being like a certain amount of this show is kind of the only thing I really knew about this show going in. Like as one of the major things. Like what's the show? Like, that's a major element. That's kind of not even spoilers at this point. It's just like what people describe the show as to some people.
It's from the sounds of it, it's such a pivotal part of what the overall story is as the show progresses and gets into what its meat is. That's just how, if you describe the show as a whole, you're like, oh, it's the Star Trek show with a Dominion war. That's a big part of it. So yeah, but this is the first time we ever hear it on the show, I believe. I don't think we've heard it before now.
I'm not sure because again,
or did we have we had a long gap? So maybe we had a long gap.
The only reason I'm thinking they must have heard it is because when she says the Dominion, all of our characters, they look at each other. They've heard it. They know it. Like they all give each other a look, don't they? They react to it. And why would they react to that so strongly?
Yeah, but that could also work as a first time thing. Like, so these characters have heard of that, and it's like a hint to the audience, or what she just said was a big deal. But yeah, I think you could also read it as, well, they don't know what it is, but they're hearing about a species that's conquered another world in the Gamma Quadrant, and that this is potentially a dangerous threat. I
would agree, but it's specifically when she says the Dominion that they react. Yeah. Like, it's not the general description. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a relatively threatening name, like as a species name goes. But
because basically she's describing that they were effectively occupied not by the Dominion but by another third-party alien race. And it's only because the Dominion came in and conquered and slaughtered their captors that they were able to scatter and get away, and they've been on the run. And I think the parallels to like Bajor were instant. As soon as she said, "Oh, we've been like held under lock and key for the last 15 years," I'm like, "Oh, sounds a lot like Bajor with the Cardassians."
No, I think theirs was a lot longer, because I think they said like 8 generations.
Oh, they may have done, yeah. I mean, the period of time I can't remember, but
yeah, because like Bajor's like 50 years, give or take, right? Whereas, I think there's a significant longer amount of time, which is why I was like, it's even worse.
Yeah, so because as soon as she said, "Oh, they're looking for this planet, this promised land that they're seeking,"
you knew where this was going, right?
Yeah, well, because she specifically says, "Oh, it's a planet on the other side of the eye of the universe, which knows great sorrow," and I'm like, well, I mean, the Bajorans have been through a hard time.
One right there.
Yeah.
I also like this, the eye of the universe. It gives it like this religious connotation.
Yeah,
right? Like it's not just a wormhole. It's like an entity. It's an actual thing. I like that.
Which is actually one of my critiques later on in the episode. Actually, like, so there's a first half of the episode is kind of building up this friendship and getting to know who they are and understanding these things. And then once it gets to the real meat of the episode, which is that we find out that they or that she, along with her other leaders, once they found the rest of the ships and some of them are on the station, they find out that all the leaders are women because the men in their race are too emotional to lead anything. There's a couple of little jokes for the men reacting to that, where Bashir and O'Brien are looking at each other like, "Oh, that couldn't be us."
Yeah, and things like it's to the point where she reacts badly to Sisko at first. Kira has to be the one to lead everything. She doesn't want Bashir to use the medical equipment.
Yeah,
she wants Kira to do it, even though she's not qualified.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, that's interesting because it's different, and we can point out some ironies with our own history to point things out. But ultimately, they decide that, hey, we've decided where this planet is. It's Bajor. Bajor's our new home, and Kira's reaction is very, oh dear, this is not going to be an easy conversation, and it kind of skips ahead a little bit to where some people from the council or whoever are coming up to like actually give their, we've skipped ahead past the initial like, hey, they want this, they're applying for refuge and all that, and it's like, hey, this is the decision, and we get to see what that decision is, and they kind of explain it a little bit and why they came to this conclusion. But even like there's like a Bajoran musician that's on the station, which by the way, he was playing the main theme of the show.
Yeah, I don't like that. That annoys me.
I don't hate it because
I think it's too self-indulgent to do in your second season.
I don't think I mind it as long as the characters don't know it's an important song.
No, but like everyone's so captivated and they're all like, "Oh, what a melody! Look how amazing this piece is."
Yeah, I don't know. So does it
too early, too self-indulgent?
Does it bother you in Rocky IV then when he's like leaving and like the brass band's doing the
less because it's the fourth movie?
Okay, all right.
Like if this was like season 3, season 4 of a show, like you're getting close to being like it's fine, but 2 seasons, come on.
I don't think I mind it. I don't think I've got a huge problem with it, but yeah, basically, it seems like a foregone conclusion. This musician even says to Kira, "Hey, these are nice people. I really like that Hanik woman, but tell them I'm sorry that the conclusion it's like they've not even heard what the conclusion is yet, but he's just assuming that the answer is no." And sure enough, yeah, like they say no, because we're going through a famine. We have just gotten out of an occupation. We're struggling to get our feet like back up, and we just cannot take. It's not like they're saying no to a few refugees. They're saying no to 3 million refugees.
I think it's worth pointing out that they're not applying for refugee status. They're applying for immigration. Okay, they're claiming they won't need any support, won't need any help, which does alter the debate to some degree.
I'm using that word because it's hard not to think of them that way given where they came from and the circumstances around it. But you're right. The way they're talking is like, hey, we don't even want help. If we end up struggling so bad in this part of the planet that we die, then let us die. That's literally something she says.
Yeah. And obviously the Bajorans are like, yeah, we're not going to just let you die, though. We'll feel responsible.
Yeah, because we're not pricks. So
yeah. And like, that's a fair point. But like, I think it's a different argument because they're saying, hey, no, we'll take that land. No one's using it. You don't want it. You can't use it. We'll be completely self-sufficient. Just leave us be. But so it's a little bit different for refugees where you're actively asking for help, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, and I think my critique kind of comes from the fact that no one ever tries to suggest or fight her, because effectively she's so convinced based on kind of a religious belief that this planet's the right planet, that it meets the requirements of like, oh, it's this planet of sorrow, we belong here. And when she's arguing, she's getting emotional, she's saying, no, you're making the wrong choice, we belong here, we can make it better. And she makes some valid points along the way. She talks about how we're literally a race of farmers, and you say this land can't be used, we're saying, no, we can bring it back, we can resuscitate it, We can, with some good conditions, we can get it back on its feet.
Maybe we can share some food, and if you help you with your famine situation.
Yeah, we could be the solution to one of the big problems that you're having right now. And the episode even started with Kira complaining that she's trying to argue with some officials about agriculture down on the planet, right? It doesn't go into much detail, but you can tell it's like setting up this idea that that's a big talking point in the Bajoran government right now, is like trying to just feed everyone and how to do that. So some valid points, but at the same time, I feel like no one ever even like acknowledges the elephant in the room, which is that you believe you belong there so avid, like she's so intent on it, and she sees it as a betrayal when Kira doesn't back her up. When she turns to Kira and says, back me up and convince them that this is the right thing, Kira can't. And I really like that moment because I love the idea that Kira wants to help her. She cares about her. She's started to like her. They've kind of bonded a little bit by this point. They've become friends. But the reaction the very first time that this woman said Bajor is going to be your new home, you knew the look in Kira's face knows that Kira doesn't think that's the right course of action, that this is a mistake. And she's not going to like lie about that just because she wants to try and like play nice with this woman. But she never once makes the argument that, look, you believe this based on a religion that no one in Bajor actually shares. You can't convince us based on this argument, and you're never going to.
I think, to be fair, like she argues that to Kira, but I don't think she ever. It doesn't feel like they argue that to the actual petition. Like it feels a lot more level-headed in what they actually submit. That's
fair. I think some of her reactions feel like they come from more of an emotional response.
They do, yeah.
Like she's like, no, I will not take this, because this is the thing. By this point in the episode, Cisco and everyone else have found them a planet that's free, that has got good weather. He says it's got mild winters. It will be great for you. Go there. And she's like, no, we don't want that. We want Bajor.
Yeah,
we want to go down there. And it's an interesting debate to have.
I think that's what would have turned this episode from, well, I think it's still pretty positive, into like a great episode, is seeing more of this debate. Maybe one of our characters were like, well, maybe we should listen to them. Maybe they're right. Maybe they could improve that land. Maybe they, will help with the famine situation. Like maybe, okay, maybe they're wrong. Maybe the Bajorans are completely right. But just, I think one person from outside of their race, that being on their side, would have been nice to have that debate.
Or maybe even just actually kind of like expanded on, because the Bajorans give, I mean, they don't show it to us, but they say, hey, we literally did projections. We mapped out what it would happen if you're on the planet, how that would go for the population, and we have concluded that it would end up worse for us and worse for you, that it would be a net negative for everyone. And the woman from this race is saying, hey, we're farmers, we can get that land right again. And they're saying, no, we have done scientific projections, we have studied this, and our science is saying, no, it isn't possible. And I think that maybe if they'd given us like some little inkling of, like, it's not just her belief they can get the land prosperous again, that there's actually some little nugget of, oh, maybe they actually can, but we're not willing to take the chance.
But I agree, but I think like, maybe I'm overlooking something really obvious, but could they not have done a trial? Like, could they not have like lived there temporarily and tried it, and then, hey, if it doesn't work, there's still that other planet?
I think maybe the concern becomes, is that once 3 million people are on the planet, how do you ensure you get 3 million people to leave?
Then don't let 3 million people on the planet. Let 300 come down, make a little village, prove that it can work. If you can get this farmable toll, yeah, sure, by all means.
I suppose like you'd have to just write against that and say, oh no, what we're going to do to fix the land requires a massive scale. It can't just be one little patch. That's how you'd write it to get around that solution, I suppose. Because there's a line at the end when they're saying goodbye, right at the very tail end of the episode, where things are still kind of cold, and obviously there's some other incidents that go down by the end. But Hannick says to Kira that it's a shame that these few decades of Cardassian control have left you so like distrusting or mistrusting of others and unwilling to accept help when it's there.
Paranoid was the word she used.
Paranoid, yeah. And I feel like, do you know what? I love that you're making that point. I just wish that you actually gave them like something compelling, like some solid thing that suggested that there was a chance beyond just you saying that you could. Like there was never like it doesn't have to be a real thing to us. Like I'm not saying they have to come up with real science here, but like give us some science fiction-y science where they fight back and say, no, this is why it'll work, right?
Yeah.
But have the Bajorans still say no because they just don't want to take the chance. And then I think that line at the end of, oh, you're just too paranoid to let someone, let someone else have a chance at like cohabitating with you and helping you. I think that line would have hit way harder if I ever actually really believed what was coming out of this woman's mouth, other than just she believed it because, religious beliefs and just
that's fair.
Whatever. I think that would have really risen the episode up quite a bit for me. Like I say, I don't think it's bad though. I think it's still got a lot of good qualities. I think that's just the thing that's holding it from being a great episode to really make the main debate like compelling.
Yeah, so. I think like I say, it's just a little flaws. And then that, and while it was entertaining in its own right, I wasn't hugely big on the subplot.
Yeah, the subplot.
It feels like it's out of a completely different episode.
I'm of two minds, because I think the way they handle the climax of it, which is where it kind of intersects with the main plot, I think is really well handled. But so the subplot, just to sort of talk about what we're saying here, is so there's a subplot with her kids, this new woman's kids, Hannick. She has two boys who are kind of mischievous. They're running around, they're trying to take things. There's a funny bit early on where Odo keeps taking things out of their hands and saying, no, you don't own that, put that down. And there's a little comedy bit. But later on, once there's a lot of these people on the station and they're all running around and Quark's being casually racist about them and saying, oh, they're flaking the skin off everywhere. You should see the floor of my bar. That's actually what led to probably one of the funniest moments of the episode is when if they don't leave soon, I'll probably run out of business. And then Odo looks up and says, oh, in that case, I hope they never leave, and then smiles. Probably the most I've ever seen Odo crack a smile is when he says that line.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, so Quark storms off, but there's some conflict because him and Jake were messing around with these other kids from the alien race, and at some point, Nod put a stink bomb on one of them. Doesn't use those words, but that's what he's describing.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
So they start chasing each other, and Odo kind of steps in at this point and says, what's the trouble here? And they say what happened, and he doesn't arrest, but he takes Nod back to the his office and sort of keeps him there until Quark comes to get him.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Rom that comes, but Quark's like, he's doing inventory. Didn't want to interrupt him. He'll lose count. You know what he's like.
I think Quark just really wanted an excuse to come and see Odo, who's his true love, his frenemy, if you will.
Oh, definitely.
That's what that is. But it turns out these boys aren't satisfied. They still want to get Nod's ears and ring them for what he's done. So they confront him again. They have a bit of a tuffle. It's Quark who steps in and kind of separates them. And I will say, I did appreciate that Jake goes and tries to talk to this other kid, the alien kid, afterwards.
He's sorry. Just leave it, yeah?
Yeah, and he still tries to be nice to him. He doesn't mistreat him or anything. He's his father's son, I guess, as best as he can. But this is where the alien kid's kind of like, yeah, they want to send us to this planet. And he's like, yeah, Jake's like, yeah, it sounds like a fine planet. It was like, well, do you want to move there? And he's like, well, no, I live here. And he's like, well, I don't want to move there either. And that kind of leads us into what's going to happen. I mean, I guess it's proving what she said about the men in her race all being too emotional to run things, because he does something stupid.
The way they were acting, like the way they were like directed to act and like they were shot, they reminded me of the thugs in Clockwork Orange. Like the way they were walking, like just everything, like, and I like. Maybe it was just me, but it was like really like just like I kept getting these flashes of it.
I suspect they weren't meant to come across as dark as that.
Perhaps not, but I think it was very telling with the idea of being too emotional. Because like that's a big thing with them in in that movie.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah. So like I don't know. Maybe I was just seeing things that weren't there, but like it came into my head a few times as I was watching it, and I don't know. I feel like it was a choice that I can kind of get behind, and it maybe made them feel a little bit overly sinister at points. But I don't know. Him at the end being like, "Well, I don't want to move either," felt borderline sinister. Being like, "No, I want this is my home."
It felt like he's going to do something. It felt like all of the efforts of like being diplomatic were about to fall through because he was about to go do something stupid that he wasn't meant to.
And to be fair, we were told like at first when they're like, oh yeah, the men are too emotional. It's played as like a bit of a joke, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. In the same way that you get some people who say, oh yeah, women too emotional, can't handle it. It's played like that, but then. Maybe this is like actually legit with the way these are acting. Maybe it's not just a joke, on the way it comes across here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, though. He's also a teenager. It's hard to decipher
as well. Yeah.
Is this just a man in their species, or is this just no? He's a dumb teenager.
yeah, could be either or.
Because that's how it really much played to me. Because effectively, what happens is him and some of his buddies steal. One of their own ships, to be fair. It's not one of the like Federation ships or anything like that. But they steal one of their own ships, which isn't fixed yet. O'Brien points out that it's leaking some sort of fuel, like it's like
radiation.
Radiation, yeah. They have to shut down, and it's right when Kira's trying to apologize to Hanik, yes. And Hanik's just saying, no, I don't accept it. I hate your guts. Like, no.
There will be no forgiveness.
But that's when Kira gets the call that our son's, like, commandeered a vehicle and is trying to fly down to Bajor. And I'm like, very quickly, this just escalated into an international incident. Now, that's not the right phrase technically, but, because...
all intents and purposes.
Yeah, because different planets and, whatnot. But, like...
This is like, you're in our airspace, you need to get out.
That's exactly what this is. That's what it made me think of. And I actually really like this scene on its own because the way they handle everything, well, they never cut to the ship, we never see him again. It's all just in the the command deck of the of the Deep Space Nine, and Sisko is like saying, "Okay, what's going on?" Kira's saying, "What's going on?" And then eventually it's like, "Hey, I've opened a comm line, but they're not responding." And his mother starts yelling down, "They're saying you have to turn the engines off and just drift and let the Bajorans like take you in with a tractor beam or something. It's dangerous. You're like the ship's not safe. You have to stop." And they don't respond whatsoever. But it escalates beautifully where two Bajoran ships start like getting close to them, and they try to talk to those two ships, and they're like, "Hey, we've got orders to shoot down any of these ships that try and land. Like they're not allowed to land on the planet because we know they want to."
Who's your orders from? Like, this guy? Right. Well, let's get him on the line then.
Yep. And they get this general one.
And it's like, yeah, this scene's fantastic.
Yeah,
because it's so like genuinely innocent. Like no one is like being truly like evil here.
No, because Kira like tries to tell the pilots of the other ships like, "Hey, this is just a teenager who's stolen a ship. He's been an idiot, but this is not representative of like anything their people have decided. This is just some dumb kid. Do not fire." And like, "Hey, we've got orders." And it's okay, we'll phone the general. And they get the general on the line. And Sisko's like, "Hey, this is Sisko of Deep Space Nine. This is a child who has commandeered this ship. Tell your men not to fire."
And to be fair, the general I mean is like, right, I'll get right on that.
Yeah.
Like at first it's like, well, they can't have a ship here. We got orders. We got to protect our space. And like, no, it's a child. Like, right, okay, don't fire.
And right as this is happening, this is when the screens. Yes, this is when the Shrian teenager fires on their ships, and you get worried, I think, in the moment because you sort of think, "Oh no, this is going to cause like an instant, almost like a reflex on the other ships to just fire back because this is what they're trained for." And the funny thing is that, well, I mean, it sounds like they might have tried to fire to scare them or something.
Because they say, "I don't think we hit."
Yeah. So that would suggest that maybe they fired off like a warning shot to scare them down. But what sounds like happened is that their own phaser, their own blast to try and hit the Bajoran ships actually ignited the radiation fuel that was leaking, and that blows them up. Because you see on the radar, the dot just goes away, it just blips out.
It's a very classic trick, but it's very effective.
Yeah, I think it was a really effective choice to never leave this room and just see it all play out from here. and never see the ships, never. And like, yeah, you could say it's a money saving thing, but you know, like they do scenes all the time on this show and ships exploding.
I think, especially because all you'd be doing is cutting to the people anyway.
Yes.
I think staying in this room and just cutting between the conversations on the different comm lines and just watching the reactions, I think that's way more effective.
Yeah, because it's almost like, okay, we're going to forget about the disagreement that, you know, the big disagreement we've just had, and we're all working together to try and save these idiot slaves. And it's all just sort of like descending into tragedy where they're trying their best. Everyone's trying their best. The general tries to, you know, take the order back. Cisco like, gets on that call immediately. And that's the thing, they even say to the pilots, like, okay, well, we're about to call the general, so don't do anything because that order's about to change. Like, she's convinced, like, you know, the general's going to, like, agree with her. Like, this isn't going to be something that's going to be a hard time to talk him down from.
And it's not.
It's not,
like,
yeah.
As soon as they're like, hey, it's a kid, they just stolen the ship, there is no real danger here, please don't kill him. They're like, okay, let's get this sorted.
And it all plays out really well. I think maybe the only critique I would have of it is that I don't know if it really affects anything otherwise in the main plot.
No, it doesn't. Nothing at all.
Yes. which is maybe the one thing, whereas I think if the ending was impacted by this, where, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I wanted them to be like teetering on like the agreement to let them come down,
and this makes it ruin the plans,
because that's too neat. It's too TV, right? To have this be the thing that ruins it. I do like that it's not doing that, but I kind of I don't know.
Be something, because this is just drama for the sake of it.
Yeah, and it's good drama.
But
that's the annoying thing. It's really well done.
It's a really good scene, but it's like, okay, it comes out of nowhere. It leads to nothing. Like, it's just there because someone had a great idea for a scene.
Yeah, it's just a shame it's not in an episode where this is more important, where they directly impacted things. Or
even if this was what, like, not ruin the agreement, but it ruined Hanique's relationship with them, like, on a personal level. Like, maybe she understood why they were saying no, like, and accepted that, hey, we don't want to take in all these immigrants right now. Maybe she understood it, but then they killed a child, and she took that personally, and that kind of ruined those relationships. I don't know, just something.
I almost feel like I want it to have the opposite effect, though. I want this to be the thing that makes her go, oh, they're trying their best to save my son's life. They clearly, like, they don't hate me. They don't hate my people.
Yeah.
You know, I almost want, like, a more positive outcome from it, but I mean, maybe it could happen earlier on, like before the decision's made, and then there could be like kind of an ambiguous, did this affect their decision? Did it not? We don't really know. That could be something. Yeah. Honestly, I can't think of another TV episode where there's been something like this in the middle of an episode, or not even the middle, it's towards the end, but like something that feels so separate, but is so good on its own from the rest of the episode. But the one thing that I can hold against it is that it doesn't feel like it actually benefits the rest of the episode.
Like, I'm glad it's there because it's fantastic in its own right, and it's probably the best scene in the episode.
I think it is. I think it's easily the best scene of the episode.
And like I said, I don't think this is a bad episode. I think it has definitely some flaws, and there are elements that I'm like, whatever. But overall, I'm pretty positive. This is like a truly, legitimately fantastic scene. It's not meaningless because it's still good in the moment and it has the weight in the moment of the characters, but it affects nothing. You if you remove this scene entirely and just cut it like from scratch, just cut the whole thing, nothing changes. You can literally leave the end of one scene, go to the start of the next thing after this, and nothing would have changed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing it kind of does is that it kind of gives you an example of how much some of her people believe they want to go down there, that he was willing to do this. But it doesn't feel like the final scene really plays any differently whether or not this happened or not, right? The final scene between Kira and her, I think, is the exact same regardless. And if anything, I almost feel like she should have been a bit more, I don't know, like a bit colder even.
It's one of those where you can go either way with it, right?
Yeah.
She can be colder because this cost me my child's life, or you go warm and like, hey, you tried your best. But
Yeah.
the way it is, it's just like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, because as much as I don't like the idea that, like, oh, they maybe were going to be accepted in this round, that there is maybe something to be said of, like, her herself after this happens, like, turning to the others and saying, I understand why we're not going to be allowed down now. I understand that this act has ruined what might have happened, and this was on us, this was on our people or something. Like, but again, I don't know if I love that. It's not perfect either.
Yeah, like there's a moment at the end because they have a specific name for the chosen place, the promised land.
Yeah.
And at the end, she's like, "I see it now. Bejor's not the promised land." And like, I feel like there's a way to tie what happened with her child into that, but I don't think it ever. Like, I don't think it does. There's no weight to that specific moment here to do with this incident.
Yeah. It's a really interesting episode in the sense that it's got a lot of flaws, but maybe it's telling that even when you get a flawed episode of Deep Space Nine, there's a lot of good ideas and good things kind of swirling around in it, even if it's not all quite fitting together the way it should.
Yeah, it's why I feel like you mentioned had a mixed rating on IMDb. I think while it is mixed in elements, I still feel like a mixed rating on IMDb feels really harsh. But I think it's more than the sum of its parts. I think it's better than what it is individually, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely felt like it was poking at a lot of ideas and things that I was appreciating as I was watching it. Like I wasn't feeling bored. I wasn't feeling. I wasn't feeling like some recent TNG episodes, not all of them, but so there's been a few recent ones that have been kind of dull to sit through because they've just been like going through the motions. I never felt that with this. I never felt like it was going through motions. I always felt like it was trying to do something, and it just never quite landed everything.
While I didn't really enjoy the subplot that much with the kids, like it feels like it's basically just there so we see the kids before this final moment. Really, I think. But like it starts so suddenly out of nowhere. We just cut to Jake and Nog just sitting there laughing at one of these kids like stealing the food.
It's funny
out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, because they're stealing. Well, it's not even that they're stealing food; they're just eating leftovers. And Nog's like, "Wait, they can just use a replicator, the idiots! Why are they eating the food that's been left behind?" I think early on in that subplot, I was thinking the reason why we're getting this and we're getting Quark sort of be a little bit racist about them is I thought that it was going to go a slightly different direction, where it was going to explore more just different viewpoints of having like refugees come into a civilization. But it never really felt like that was like a factor for the Bajor stuff though. It never felt like, oh, Bajorans won't welcome us. It never felt like that was even like in the conversation. It was always about,
which I think is extra weird given that all the stuff with the musician is like, hey, we need to preserve our cultural heritage. We need to make sure that we have a cultural identity going forward. But that doesn't feel like it factors into the decision not to include these refugees. It doesn't feel like we will dilute our cultural identity. Like that doesn't. Maybe it's there in the background, like on their end, but we don't see any of that. None of that comes across in what they're telling us is the decision. I
mean, is it possible that's the point? Is that like they would never admit that that's part of the reason, but that's there for us to see and recognize that it is.
I don't. If that is the point, I'm going to hold that against the episode because I don't think it shows that very clearly.
No, I mean that's fair. I'm just based on what you're saying. I'm just kind of.
I think you could argue it's there with like, hey, they're a bit biased. They're not willing to give it a shot. But like we said, hey, they're giving it a shot based off of their blind faith anyway. Like, there's no evidence that they can actually farm it beyond them just saying, yeah, I'm sure we can manage it.
Yeah, I think maybe if they'd presented us with the idea a little bit more that maybe they're being a little biased and they're ready to accept their science that just backs up what they want anyway. Maybe if there was a little inclination of that, combined with maybe the other side having like a bit of scientific proof for why they can rejuvenate the farmland. I mean, like there's definitely like there's like a 10 out of 10 version of this episode that could exist, and it's just
Yeah.
Maybe it needs to be a two-parter. Maybe there's too much to get into for one 44-minute episode. But
despite all of this, where there are like these flaws and problems, I still like the episode a lot because there's enough there to make me really think about these things, and like maybe it's not quite nailing all of them, maybe it's not actually hitting on every note, but there's enough to make you go, oh, I see what they're getting at here, and I like the questions it's raising, even if it doesn't really land the answers.
Yeah, that's an interest. Hell, even just the fun idea of like the translator has to listen to them for a bit to finally deduce what they're speaking.
Their language is that alien that the grammatical system is like nothing they've got on record.
Yeah, but I'm just meaning the way it's represented with like, gradually English words start sprinkling in.
Yeah.
Throughout the sentences. That was a fun little way of doing it. It does raise some questions exactly like, why is it lip syncing perfectly? Like, how are these universal translators working?
Yeah.
But that's just something we accept with Star Trek. Just go with it.
Don't worry about that. Yeah. But there are things that like I really like the idea of like, hey, this language is so alien, like that. There's a whole science of how language reflects culture, and like it is a direct reflection of the culture that creates the language. It's like this symbiotic relationship back and forth between the two things. So the idea that, hey, their language is so alien, they must be so alien. But then ultimately, once they get through that translation barrier, like they have a lot in common. Like it turns out, her and Kira both hated that dress, but there was a misunderstanding at first with the reactions, but ultimately they actually have a lot in common with those things. And again, there are all these ideas of the hints of the culture clash, but they're actually quite similar. All these things that it hints at, it just doesn't quite get into.
Yeah, there's a lot more meat here, and I suspect that a lot of these themes are probably going to come back up again in different ways and different plots. That'd be my guess.
I would agree.
So yeah, there's some fun stuff. We mentioned a little bit of Odo freaking out at them, because there's at one point where the two boys are kind of like wandering off and he's trying to wrangle them in, and that was a little bit amusing. Like I said, Odo and Quark, having a bit of back and forth, so always good. So some of the usual niceties that we get with Deep Space Nine. But that is pretty much it, though. That's still an interesting episode. I mean, we talked for over 40 minutes about it, so
pretty much on topic the entire time.
We were. And yeah, just to go back around to what I started with, they mentioned Dominion, which may have been the first time, may not have been. Remind us in the comments if they've said it already, and we've just forgotten. But it felt
Either
like
way,
a big deal.
They played it like a big moment in the episode.
Yeah, so it feels that we're starting to sprinkle the seeds of that. If it did come up before, I have to imagine it was when we got some Odo, like, backstory, or when he was trying to, one of his episodes. That's the only place I can think of, but I could be wrong.
Yeah,
anyway,
maybe on one of the ones where they went through the wormhole.
So, no, curious to see where we go next. So we are back to Next Generation on the next review, but when we come back to Deep Space Nine, after that, we'll be looking at an episode called Rivals, and here's the description on IMDb. Quark meets his match when a new rival opens a casino opposite his bar on the promenade. Okay, sign me up.
This sounds like a fluff episode, but it's going to be amazing.
Yes. Meanwhile, the station is suffering from issues of high improbability. What does that mean?
It means unlikely events are occurring.
Okay.
like people winning a casino more than they should be.
That doesn't sound like a separate thing. That sounds like the same plot.
That sounds like suspiciously related, wouldn't you say? Yeah.
Maybe that's why they like the other casinos so much, is because they're winning a lot more.
Yes, it makes you lucky.
Yeah. Quark having a rival, though. Oh, which actually, that's one thing we didn't mention in this episode. Quark talking about how he monitors his income by the hour. So he's got projections based on like just the past 26 hours. He's looking at projections based on what this musician's doing to his bar, and he's not happy. I thought that was funny.
It's gonna ruin it.
Yeah. Which, thinking back on it, is a neat little foreshadowing of the topic later on, because he's basically saying he's got projections of how things won't go well because of this new element that's been introduced into his bar, which is exactly what the Bajorans are worried about with this new element coming into their planet.
They're actually very short-term projections, and who knows whether or not they was right or not in the long run.
Kira even argues, hey, more people will come because of this musician in time, because it'll spread good word. And arguably, everyone hearing how good the Bajorans treated this group of people might have made people think Bajor's worth helping more. Maybe more trade routes would be opened up.
Yeah, and or maybe it was just the abstract of, hey, there are advantages to this as well, like, hey, maybe,
yes.
you know, like the helping with the food situation.
Yeah, I'm glad I went back and brought that up now, because that's actually a really good point. Anyway, so
see, it's things like this I'm like, this is actually a very well written episode. It's just,
there's good stuff
it's
here.
It's just a little bit flawed.
But yeah, we'll see what the next Deep Space Nine brings. But let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and of course you can get bonuses and support the content and help make sure it keeps all coming by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting over there. But you get a bunch of stuff, particularly for the movie channel. Mail Fuzz Movies is where all the movie podcasts live, including the sci-fi movie podcast, The Atomic Sam Experiment, which might be of relevance since you're, listening to some Deep Space Nine reviews. So thank you very much for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there's a lonely group of puddles that might not accept a new puddle by the name of Odo, should he ever want to emigrate there, even though it would be their loss, because Odo is the bestest puddle there is.